Meet Lieutenant Colonel Clegg Forbes, astronaut, space pioneer, and American hero. Upon return from a super-secret flight on a super-secret spacecraft, the world pulls a cruel joke on him. The joke wasn't that his parents named him Clegg. Clegg and his two co-pilots see their contributions, their very existence, vanish. Every generation, young and old, forgot about them and what they did. Colonel Forbes desperately tries to prove he is someone before it's too late. This is a cautionary tale about the unknowns of space travel and the dangers flying too high into the clouds. This was an episode written by Rod Serling and directed by Douglas Hayes. As always, the alternative theories mentioned within may cause anxiety, rage, and disbelief, but that's why you're here, I hope. Kindly consider leaving a like, share, or subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Now, let's pour a beer and tell some stories, but try to stick around. From 1959, it's And When the Sky Was Opened. Few remembered when an experimental interceptor spacecraft known as the X-20 made its successful return from the heavens. This achievement would help protect America from troublesome adversaries of the time. The three pilots, Lieutenant Colonel Clegg Forbes, Colonel Ed Harrington, and Major William Gart, were celebrated in print and hailed as heroes. Forbes and Harrington returned without a scratch. Major Gart, however, suffered a broken leg and was quietly sent to a military hospital, where the halls are routinely inspected by military brass. For the two astronauts not physically challenged, they celebrate at a local drinking spot, where pretty women are as plentiful as free beer. But Harrington doesn't feel right and can't handle his drink. He tells the odd-looking Forbes that he feels like he's about to disappear. Harrington gets the inspiration to call his parents, but they tell him over the phone they have no son. Harrington is distraught and confused, and shares his intuition with Forbes that maybe someone, something, somewhere made a mistake by letting them get through. Forbes steps away for only a moment. The latest newspaper editions have erased, canceled if you will, Harrington, who vanishes. No one in the bar remembers him. In Forbes' eyes, the world is playing a big trick on him. When Forbes visits Gart at the hospital, he discovers Gart also is infected with the same faulty memory as the rest of the world. In Gart's eyes, there was never a Harrington. Forbes begins to believe that something is pulling them out of reality one by one. With this epiphany, Forbes feels he doesn't belong. It begins as peace and contentment, before he falls into a nervous breakdown and runs out the door. Gart hobbles out of his bed to chase, but Forbes vanishes from the hall. The nurse insists there was never a Colonel Forbes. Gart turns and points at evidence that will prove his sanity. Gart points to an empty spot near the window, expecting to see a second bed there. When he takes another look at the newspaper, he sees only himself as the lone pilot who made his historic journey. It's clear Forbes was right all along. Shaken and scared, Gart can do little more than lay back in his bed and wait. The nurse returns with the medical officer and nonchalantly explains the hospital ward is completely empty. The erasure of three space pilots is complete. Like their X-20, the secret will be forever preserved because the three men and their fantastic flying machine never existed. And When the Sky Was Opened was an episode that may be familiar with viewers of 90s television science fiction. It shares striking resemblance with Star Trek The Next Generation episode Remember Me, with distant references to the Stephen King story The Langoliers. If you watch it a second time, look how relieved Colonel Forbes looks when the nurse remembers him and Major Gart early. This is in contrast with the ending, as the nurse's memory of all the pilots had vanished. Not only do we see the present change, both Harrington and Gart see their own history change in the eyes of others after they are cognizant of the anomaly. Gart tells Forbes he walked out alone. There was no Harrington. Forbes sees his own message rewritten he had given to Amy. Even Gart sees furniture disappear in his ward. There are subtle tweaks to recorded history as the world remembers the pilot's return. It comes in the newspaper headlines. When it was the three, the photo description mentions a crash but no disappearance. The photo of just Forbes and Gart mentions the crash and disappearance. When it's just Gart, the headline and description changes again. What can we make of it? The episode gives no other clues than Harrington's theory, made while delusional, by the way, that something let them through when they shouldn't have. Curiously, I never took it seriously. They were just ramblings of vanishing men reaching for an explanation. My theory has little to do with aliens and more about being out of sync with time. We know the space plane lost contact for 24 hours before its crew of 3 were rescued in the desert. I'm also presuming the plane wasn't an overnight craft complete with a lavatory and mess. After all, it was an interceptor. While I can see it may be interpreted as the plane crashed and it was recovered 24 hours later, there is evidence to support the plane projected 24 hours into the future, then crashed, and quickly rescued thereafter. Like the urban legend, The Man from Torred, the timeline of this alternate reality was corrected one at a time. It's not because of where they should not have been, but when. If you happen to have the Twilight Zone Companion by Mark Zicree, you'll find little more. It's a story about the fear of the unknown, the fear of traveling too far from Earth, 900 miles to be exact, and what will happen to the human mind and the human condition. It would end up being a short video if I stopped now. It wouldn't be a true Synergy video without some alternative theories. What is the story's narrative? We have 3 characters, super achievers, who literally went above and beyond. What happens when they return from their definition of work and sacrifice? The older generation doesn't acknowledge them. It didn't happen. I mean this literally. So what's the point? This is the first generation after World War II and the Korean War. A generation that didn't fight on the beaches or in the trenches. Instead, they muck around in seedy bars where young women show up unescorted. Oh no! And drink freely. The heroes laugh about their lives, enjoying every moment without hunger or despair, where the only question they have is, do they have enough to smoke in a hospital? While that does sound absurd, keep in mind that there were 2 appearances by telephone of the older mentor types, the elder generation. Harrington speaks with his parents, and Forbes speaks with his general. In both conversations, their mentors keep their distance, deny their accomplishments and their worthy existence. Forbes is physically locked out of a favorite hangout place, and literally crashes the glass to step in. But the world will not put up with his fun. The lights are off, the chairs are up. It's time to grow up and come home. If that was too much, ponder this. Can you name the 3 most recent astronauts who returned to Earth from space? How about the last 3 who landed on the moon? If not, you just experienced the episode. Could it be that Rod Serling predicted the banality of space travel long before it started? Was there an unintended prediction buried in a story about the future of space travel? Will our hubris make us forget the challenges and sacrifices? If so, that's as regrettable as forgetting the early pioneers of space. And When the Sky Was Opened is a haunting episode when watching for the first time. I think what makes stories like this work is following the protagonist fight the obvious absurdities of the ever-changing reality. Not only are they trying to survive, but convince anyone to believe them. Yet, the episode suffers from low replay value. You think how the episode plays out non-linear was foreshadowing the skipping of time, but it was just a technique to rush into exposition, The hospital scene was a stage play. It was shot on such a low budget it had to include a couple filler scenes, and because of a tarp, the production never needed to show the vaulted X-20. Instead of a clever, deliberate symbolism, I chalk it up to favorable coincidence. Some of you may be wanting to hear about the production error when Forbes thinks he can't see his reflection in the mirror when his hands are clearly visible. I just shrug my shoulders and pretend he's having a nervous breakdown. He's not a vampire after all. And When the Sky Was Open was not the first or last about the troubles of spacemen and their fabulous flying machines. I give it 2 dimensions out of 5. It does have a couple tropes. Tag them It's Not Easy Being an Astronaut and Alternative Reality. This is Mr. G of Synergy leaving you with these final words. If you hear a roaring engine from up above, but do not see a plane when you look up, that flying vehicle may be out of sight and out of time and in the Twilight Zone. Check out other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching.